Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Molding You podcast. I'm Jonathan Dickler, Florida licensed attorney, Florida Mold Assessor, and I started this podcast to encourage people to get into mentorship, manifestation, motivation to chase their passions and build the life that they dream of. And I'm honored to be joined by Christina Greenfield, Texas attorney and consultant extraordinaire. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. So excited.
Me too. So let's dive into the world of manifestation, mentorship, motivation. So for me, I started off as a mold tester, just basically paying my way through law school. That's how it started. And then I learned about how we can really help people heal, and that became a passion of mine. So can you tell a little bit about your story and how you kind of manifested your desires?
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of my story is unintentional. So I'm not sure. I mean, it was not intentional manifestation to start, for sure. Looking back, I feel like it was really more God-led, and I just happened to fall into the right places. Should I go all the way back to college?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from high school, I went to A&M, and I was originally accepted for biomedical science because I wanted to be a vet. So all I ever cared about was animals. But then I looked at the curriculum before class even started, and it was all like science and math. And I was like, uh-oh, like, I'm not good at science or math. And it's a very competitive program, right? So I was like, oh no, probably not the right fit. And this is going to be showing my age. But like back then, A&M is one of the top business schools in Texas. But back then, if you had a high enough GPA, then you could just transfer in. And so I had the high enough GPA. So I was like, well, this is the hardest school to get into. So I'm just going to go ahead and transfer in, and I'll see kind of how it goes. So I got into the business school, and I had no idea what I was going to study. And I just kind of picked management because like accounting is also math and finance is also math. Mm-hmm. I was like avoiding that entirely. So I did management, and I worked as a bartender and a waitress like all through college. And I was the first person in my family to finish college, to kind of in my immediate family. And so we really had no idea like what was happening. It was just like, oh, you're going to graduate college and all these doors are going to be open for you. And so I graduated college, and I was like, where's my great job, Mm-hmm. And the only thing I knew how to do was like sling drinks and, mm-hmm. do the waitress thing. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? So Enterprise Rent-A-Car is a job that they market really to like management majors. They hire only college graduates, and they're like, hey, this is gonna be so great because we're gonna front your business and you're gonna run this business. And so the reality was I was like out there washing cars in a suit and heels, and like, I was like, how is this the life? I was mm-hmm. like, this is awful. And I took one business law class like in that management curriculum. And I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. Like my brain actually really works this way. But I was adamantly against it because my mom told me that you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I was like, no, definitely not. But I ended up taking the LSAT anyways because I was like keeping my options open, at the time before I had found a job. So I did the Enterprise Rent-A-Car thing for like, I think it was like 3 years. I was managing the Intercontinental Airport facility. And it was like, that was the worst job. I would rather... Like, I actually liked bartending. I was like, that's mm-hmm. fun. But that job is horrible. Like, people are so mean. They're traveling and they're stressed out, or they've had a car accident. Like, it's a horrible job. So one day when I was like about ready to quit, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go try law school. And so I applied for like the 3 law schools that were still accepting applications at the time. And it was like South Texas and I think St. Mary's, which is in San Antonio, and then one other school. And I got waitlisted on one. I got accepted with scholarship to one, but that was one where I would have to move. And then South Texas was in Houston. And so I was like, okay, like I'll just go there, So then I quit the job. I was super excited to quit that job and start law school. But I had no idea that South Texas I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea it was known to be a litigation school, and I've never had any interest in being a litigator. Like anti-litigator was my kind of, mm-hmm. Because I always saw litigators as people who are able to like really like think really fast and like objection, and I do my best thinking probably like 3 days after, I'm like in the shower and I'm like, yeah, and I like think about what I would say, next. So I was like, no, I'm not a litigator. But they ended up having a transactional law track, so that worked out. But I graduated from South Texas, and then went to work for a judge for about a year right after law school because it was like a briefing attorney position. So it was a one-year job. And then like 6 months in, they're like, you got to start finding, like you're going to have to find a job. Like this is not a forever position, right? So I had a friend of mine who worked for a company and she had set up their international anti-corruption compliance group. And she was like, do you know anything about the FCPA? And I was like, I'll Google it, you know? And they're like, I Googled it. And they had a position for a trade sanctions lawyer, which if you know anything about trade, export, import, like you can't really fake knowing that, but I tried, you know, like I went for that interview and I like really tried to pretend like I knew what I was talking about, but they knew I didn't, so I didn't get that job. But I ended up staying in contact with the chief compliance officer and just really organic conversations and just like, can I take you to coffee? I saw this article that I thought you might be interested in. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And he was very professorial, so he like loved that. And then he ended up creating a position for me where he was like, hey, we're getting all of these reports from outside counsel that say that our third-party agents don't know anything about the FCPA. And so like we have a real risk here, you know? So like, we're going to create a program where you're going to kind of create the agent training program, travel all over the world and teach all these third parties about the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So I was very young and naive and I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. That's so exciting. And it really was. Like I was off to China and Russia and the Middle East and, you know, all of the countries that are considered high risk for bribery and corruption. But I'm teaching them about a U.S. law, right? And I'm trying to get them to buy in to like this company's compliance program, which was not an easy task. But it taught me how to read the room, and it taught me how to adjust the conversation to the people that I'm talking to. So that was like, you know, one of my big learnings. And then from there, you know, I've had different jobs in different areas, but always corporate. So whether it was corruption or I've done transportation, maritime, trucking, rail, pipeline, commercial, business partner, you know, strategic business partner, trying to help the company like actually, you know, facilitate deals and negotiate large transactions, M&As and joint ventures, corporate secretary. So kind of a generalist after that. But what I figured out was that where I really shine is places where we haven't really blazed a trail yet. So if there was a project that nobody done before and everybody else was like, I don't want to do it because there's no precedent, I don't know how to do it, you know, I'm like, let me figure it out, you know. So I worked together with the engineers and we kind of like always just figured it out, best reasonable judgment type situation. And so I was really, really good at that. So just kind of climbing the corporate ladder and like figuring out how to be really indispensable to, you know, these multinational companies. And then we moved into a house, my husband and I got really, you know, we were like, oh, we're doing real well. So we're going to buy a house that's like the top of our budget in a great location. And we're going to, you know, we're just going to put everything into this house. This is going to be our forever home, which is like first mistake. We labeled it forever home, you know? And we had one daughter at the time. And my husband was just out of the Army. So when we got married, he was in the Army for 14 years. And we decided that I was going to be working while he was going to go to school because he was a non-commissioned officer. So we were going to see if we could have kids, see if we could like do the family thing. Immediately we had my first daughter. And so we moved into this house that was new to us, but not at all new. And my daughter, she was about 2 at the time. By 2.5, she had an autism diagnosis. And so, you know, we were confused because she had been meeting all her developmental milestones up until that point. Long story short, we figured out that house had high levels of toxic mold, which resulted in neurological inflammation and all of the symptoms that looked like autism. I mean, she was just, she checked all the boxes, not all the boxes, but she checked enough boxes to get the diagnosis from a developmental pediatrician. And so for the next almost 5 years, 4.5 years, we were in kind of the special needs world where we were, you know, doing a special education. We took her from her Montessori school, put her into a public school so she could get the special education assistance, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, because she stopped talking. She wouldn't make eye contact. You know, we didn't, she couldn't tell us, you know, how her day was or why she had that bruise, you know, like it was awful. And we had another daughter somehow during that time. Actually, she was born right before we got the diagnosis. Her sister was born. She was 3 months when we got the diagnosis for my oldest. But then we found a doctor, a functional medicine doctor, who I told this story to, just like I told every other doctor that we'd seen. And she said, what changed? You know, and that kind of took me back. So I was like, what do you mean? Nothing changed. I mean, we just work and, we like do what we can, and we figured out, okay, it was the house. So that's how we figured out high levels of toxic mold after she told us we needed to test. We did genetic testing to figure out that my daughter, kind of what she was working with. And she did have high levels of toxic mold in her system. So we had to figure out where it was coming from. And this was COVID time, so we're spending a lot of time at home. And then we figured out it was the house. It was hidden in the HVAC. And once we figured that out, we had a couple of angel people that just kind of dropped into our life and validated enough for us that this was real, and that this could be the cause of my daughter's sudden, regression and diagnosis. And so we left that house, and within probably 3 months, she started to change, and she started to be able to follow instructions. She was making eye contact. She could have conversation, all of the things that had gotten her the autism diagnosis, she just dropped. She wasn't experiencing them anymore. She was sleeping through the night. She wasn't screaming every night, So when I figured that out, of course, just very similar to most people, you're like, I don't want to be in that situation again. So how can I figure this out? Like, her genetics are what her genetics are. We can't change that. But I can't make the same mistakes that I made with this other house, right? So I started digging into kind of the building science. And again, this goes back to just my propensity to be like, I can figure it out. Like, if it's figure outable, I can do it, and I will. And so I took what I am really good at, and I just leveraged those skills for my family. And I was trying to figure out, how do we build a house that doesn't result in the problems that this other house had, right? And then I kind of, as I was doing that, I was trying to share on Instagram, because I was like, other people need to know this, because we're not like geniuses, but we're not complete idiots. And if we didn't know that this was possible, then there's so many other people who don't know, and I'm not, I'm very, very adamant about trying to make sure that people don't misunderstand me when I say, because my daughter's autism diagnosis was removed. Okay. And a lot of people interpret that to mean that I'm saying that we healed her from autism. And I think those are very different things. I think my daughter was diagnosed because the criteria to diagnose for autism is behavioral based, and she had those behaviors, which is very distinct and different from saying we healed her from something, because she no longer experienced those behaviors because she no longer had the inflammation. But everybody's body is different, and the reason that they have those behaviors is not always environmental for some people, right? So we removed the environmental conditions that cause the neurological inflammation, which meant that she no longer had the criteria to qualify for the autism diagnosis. But again, very different than saying we healed her from autism, because all those years I spent as an autism mom, I realized how fiercely protective we have to be of our children, right? And so I want to make sure people understand that's not what I'm saying. But we were able to relieve those symptoms for her because of the work of very many people who helped us, and then figuring out how we could help other people, became a huge passion. And the fact that I didn't have background in construction didn't stop me, because I was like, I have to figure this out. I'm not somebody who moves out of fear. I'm somebody who moves out of information. And I think a lot of people's first steps is like going into those Facebook groups and trying to see is this real? Is this normal? What can we do? How do we make, and those groups can be good maybe for a moment, but they can also be really, really scary and like a lot of fear, and maybe not intentionally for everybody, but some people are just describing their situation that never got any better. Right. So I removed myself from those groups after a minute being in them. But I realized there's just so many people that like need guidance on how did they avoid this. So being a lawyer, I was like, I can't just give people advice on anything and expect that my family's, assets aren't potentially exposed. So I had to create a company so that I could make sure that I had the appropriate protections to be able to provide people advice and support, the same advice and support that I wished that I had had when we were experiencing that. And that's how Conscious Healthy Home was born. Because of my need to just share information of like, hey, there's actually a solution, and it's not necessarily, it's not directly related to mold at all. It's really related to how do we prevent the conditions that are conducive to mold, which is, water, air, food source. And those are things that can be prevented, but you have to really kind of know how to do that ahead of time. and not expect that that's just part of the normal construction process. But again, that's part of how my mind just worked with my legal background, risk analysis, and figuring out, different industries and how we can kind of build those bridges. So,
Yeah, wow. That is a powerful story and inspiring, emotional, all of the above. But it's interesting how things that happen in life bring us to where we are, to where we can help so many people. You talked about so many things that are super important. I think, as I spent years as a mold assessor and now as a mold lawyer, also somewhere I never thought I'd be in a million years. When I first heard of mold testing, I literally laughed because I didn't know anything about it.
yeah.
And I've said a lot of things online about mold, which I believe to be true. Autism is one of those things that I've steered away from because of cancel culture. And now I think it's more appropriate to discuss. But one of the most common themes I've seen with mold exposed people is the autism in the children. Whether it's autism or symptoms that are related to autism or somewhere in the middle, it's incredible to me how people who have gotten out of the mold or have healed, these symptoms have gone away, like the nonverbal or the tics or the food sensitivities or the lights and sound sensitivities. Like these are all things that you could say are autism or somewhere on the spectrum. But people say, well, it's not curable, it's not fixable, it's not treatable. But the reality is that that's not the case in most or many cases, if not all cases. I mean, at a certain point, there's probably something biological or physiological that's happening in the brain or body to cause these things. And I've seen without fail that when the mold goes away, the kids start talking again. They start acting more like a kid and interacting. And, I've seen crazy things in moldy houses. Like I've seen people punching themselves in the head. I've seen people hit the deck and fall to the floor. We've seen people hallucinating. And a lot of people think, well, this is kind of like a spiritual thing or it's religious or this is happening for a reason. But a lot of it is environmental caused. And studying environmental science and policy and law, like we learn that all these diseases or symptoms or sicknesses, disorders, they're tied to something 99% of the time. I mean, maybe 100%.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting and important and brave of you to share that story. I know it's emotional, but there's hope for people who are in that struggle, that not only can you help your own family, but you can help millions of others.
Yeah.
And
that's something I always think important for people to just kind of understand is that, as I'm sure you've talked about, there is a subset of the population who are more susceptible. So they say 25% of the population has a gene to make them highly susceptible to mold, that's still a lot of people, right? And I question the validity of that number. Like, how do you even come up with that? Because my entire family got diagnosed with that gene, or we found out that we have that gene, each of us. And so like all four of us have it. Like, what are the odds, And, but the fact that, whether or not you're highly susceptible is one thing, but the fact of the matter is if you just take a step back and think like, what does mold do? Like, what is it for? What's its purpose? Its purpose is to break down, it breaks things down. And so that's great in the outdoor environment, but do you want that in your body, in your lungs, in your brain? No, you don't. And so it's not good for anyone. It's not meant to be in the indoor environment. It's an outdoor, it's meant to be outside.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way we build our homes, it's kind of like we are basically outside. I mean, your AC unit turns into like a swamp filled with mold. The basement is a swamp. The attic is a swamp. I mean, for lack of a better word, people think, oh, we're living indoors, but we're really just outside with these paper walls. And, unless you have a consultant who helps you build the right kind of home, you could be setting yourself up for a disaster. And it's better when you're outside because there's fresh air. There's, you're not confined. And when you have a home that's moldy, especially the AC, for example, it's just constantly circulating that.
Yeah.
There's no break from it. And some people have the AC always on, which you shouldn't really do. It's just constantly blowing all the time. And I don't believe there's good molds, or I think everyone is susceptible. I mean, if you take anyone and put them in these houses that I've seen, they're not going to feel well.
Yeah.
Which could
good
look
for anyone.
Yeah, and it could look different for multiple different people. Someone could just have a headache. The other person will have a sniffle. The
Yeah.
other person will have gut issues, or it can become much more serious, typically with like a longer exposure.
And what's interesting too is like some of the symptoms is just they're just so highly not popularized, but like mainstream. Headaches, anxiety, depression, gut issues. All the things that you just mentioned. Like there's a medicine for each of those things to suppress those symptoms. So a lot of times people it doesn't register to them because like similar to us, I was like, well, I've got a headache every day because I have a high stress job and now I've got a special needs kid and like my husband can't remember anything because his symptom was brain fog. So I was like, I have a headache because like life sucks, and so a big glass of wine and a few ibuprofen every night feels normal to me, and it was for a lot of years, and I didn't realize like, no, it's not my husband that's giving me a headache every day when I go home. It's the house that I'm going home to, and my poor husband, because he was like working from home and doing school. So he was there all the time. So it's, yeah, everybody's symptoms are different.
Yeah, and one of the most common themes I see in mold is marital issues or familial issues, because there's the headaches, but then there's also, well, we don't have $1 million to remediate, or we don't have $10,000 to get a mold test, or 5,000, or
and that's if they even know about it.
Yeah,
when they're having issues.
Yeah, we see a lot of people that their marriages come close to failing just because of mold. But one thing I wanted to talk about, which we discussed earlier, was motivation in general.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of people in mold who have what's called a mold hold, or they're literally, it could be the brain fog, or they just don't have the energy or the desire or the ability to actually make a change or learn something new. So not just in terms of mold, but how do you kind of motivate people who are, whether it's mold or just stuck in life in general? I know you talked about some ways of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is the most healthy thing, and it's probably not, but personally, I just can't, I can't let myself wallow in kind of misery. I'm just not made that way. And so consistently my whole life, if something bad happens, I give myself a time period, and so I'm like 2 days, 3 days, for mold, I gave myself a week, which is the longest I've ever given myself to kind of like mourn and be sad about something. But I literally just sat down and I was like, okay, you've got 7 days, like 7 days. And I cried every day for 7 days on the way to the house to like clean the stuff up or whatever. But at the end of that 7 days, I was like, you're done. Like, just stop, And now I know more about kind of self-care and like letting yourself work through the emotions and things. And so like probably not the healthiest, but it kept me moving. Like it doesn't, I will not just stop because, I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about my husband. I'm thinking about like the life that we have to rebuild, like as we're losing it, and nobody else is responsible for that except for me, and him. Right. But I can't control him. So I can only control myself. So, I have to move. Like I just make a decision to do something and I just do it. And I don't know where that comes from other than, I mean, maybe it's a trauma reaction. Like I have no idea, but it works. Like it gets me through the hard things. And thank God, this is one thing I learned. I think it was like Tony Robbins. I watched his documentary, and the one thing that resonated with me was something to the effect of, he said, that we can acknowledge these traumas that we have experienced and we can be really sad about them and everything, but we also have to thank them for like the tenacity, the things that it gave us to survive, And that's why I don't spend too much time kind of digging into like, is that healthy or why do I do that? Because it doesn't really matter. It's gotten me through things that have allowed me to survive. And so it's just to continue to move and to not move from fear, but figure out what is scaring me and how can I educate myself about it? Because oftentimes things are scary because we don't understand them, And I think that everything is figure outable, at least to a degree where you can understand the landscape. I'm not gonna make myself a brain surgeon, obviously, but I can understand construction. I can understand health enough to be able to say I'm no longer going to disempower myself by outsourcing the information that I have to make a good decision for my family, because ultimately all the people that we thought we relied on in good faith, they weren't there when we were dealing with the autism diagnosis, you know, like they weren't there when we lost everything that we lost. When you know, we're still recovering financially and, you know, all the material things, like they weren't there. Right. And why would they be? It's not, my family is not anybody else's responsibility except for mine. So I think that extreme accountability, again, I don't know if that's toxic or not, but that's like literally what I do and how I approach things. That book that I gave you, The Growth Mindset. Again, I really think that all of this, getting through this was very God led for us. When we had the autism diagnosis, I had a big fight with the school, the public school, because they were trying to remove accommodations for my daughter. And I said, why are you trying to remove accommodations for her? Because she hasn't made any improvement. And they were like, well, you know, she started to make eye contact. Interestingly, we had removed dairy and gluten from her diet. It was like one of the first things that we did. And she started to be able to maintain eye contact. And so they were like, well, she's making eye contact. So the fact that she's not progressing from an educational perspective is not autism. And I was like, so what are you saying? You know, and then like the mama bear came out at me and I was like, tell me what you're saying, because to me, you're telling me that she's not capable. And I had some choice words that were probably inappropriate to confront the school that was trying to remove accommodations for her. But I was like, you're telling me that she's not capable. And I know she's capable because she was meeting all, you know, going through the whole thing. And I was like, she is capable. And so you trying to remove her accommodations is not acceptable. And so we had a big fight about that. And then right about that time is when we moved out of the house. And then I was like, I'm not sending her back to that school. So I sent her to a different school. And it was a very, very different school. It's called Acton Academy. And they're all about kind of letting children grow and learn organically. And, you know, it's a whole different kind of mindset. Ultimately, that wasn't really the best for her and what she needs, but it was great for the period of time. But one of the required readings was this book, this growth mindset book by Carol Dweck. And I read it and I was just like, yes, that is it. Because what that book says a lot of different things, but one of the main things that it says that I share with anybody who will listen is you have to seek out failure, because it's only when you fail that you realize that you've reached a limit that you're not capable of yet. So that tells you you're in the right place. So like consistently seek out failure, you know? And then the next step is don't give up, right? And like adjust, don't do the same thing over and over again, but seek out failure, figure out what you can learn. You kind of like testing the fence, right? And then when you figure out what you could have done better next time, then do it better next time, you know? And so that's been a big driver for me, is just make a decision and do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And I know you and Dr. Stafford talked about that a bit, and I love that. But it's just, you make the decision and you do it. And then, you know, you go from there. I think so many people let perfection be the enemy of the good. And I think that stifles a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been reading a lot about anxiety and things like that. And I agree that anxiety and fear, people think they're bad, but they're actually good. Like these are signs that you have something to overcome, or that you have maybe a weakness, or you're a little timid, or whatever it may be. And these are actually really good signs that your body's telling you, hey, stay exactly where you are, or you're going to have to do something big to grow.
Yeah.
And I've been living by lately, like, if this thing is going to embarrass me, then I should go do it. If I'm going to feel embarrassed or I'm going to feel scared, if I'm scared, that's my sign, like I should go do it.
Yeah.
Or anxious, like, because if you don't, then you're just stuck permanently. If you never did something that you were scared of, you would never, ever change. And I like so many things that you said, but one of the most important, I think, is like when you're on a plane and they say, put your gas mask on even before your kids. And that's one thing a lot of people don't get. And even a lot of my clients, they're like, I can't, like, I have to take care of my kids first. But how can you if you don't take care of yourself? So I like how you said, you know, even if it's 7 days or 1 day, and I don't think that's toxic. I think that's perfectly healthy if you need to cry for a week, cry for a week. You know, I think it's super important that, especially mothers and fathers who are listening, like, take care of yourself, because you won't be able to take care of anyone else or in any other scenario. Super important. And one thing you were talking about earlier was how you kind of faked it until you made it in some ways, which I think on the flip side, you could say you were real until you made it. Like we talked about authenticity and how that's the most important thing. Like you knew you didn't want to wash cars at Enterprise, or like you didn't exactly know where you were going, but you knew when things didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. Like this is kind of like a self-help podcast, and people think, well, I don't know what I want to do. So how can I help myself even if I don't know where I want to go?
Yeah.
It's like, just keep being yourself. And like you said, keep moving, which I said on the first episode, like depression can't hit a moving target, or really fear, anxiety, embarrassment. Like if you're on the move, you're not going to have time to think those things.
Yeah.
So whether it's life or even in mold, like I say, take fast action. Like even if it's just going for a walk, that could be the most productive thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people listening who have literally never taken a walk. Like I feel that is true.
Really?
And like, I mean, I'm sure there's people who maybe have taken a 5-minute walk, but some people, I think if you're having trouble getting your life going, start with something small, take a walk, get some sunlight, eat a little healthier, do a job search, write down on a piece of paper, what are my passions?
Yeah. Something physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether it's faking it till you make it, or, be real until you make it. Like if you don't know how to do something, just Google it or chat GPT it or AI it. I mean, it's crazy right now. There's people that are doing 10 jobs at once from chat GPT and Google.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have to be an expert. And like you said, perfection is never what we're striving for. Everyone wants to be perfect, but what happens when you're perfect? Then what?
Yeah.
Like you have nothing.
Yeah. I've actually never understood that, which is maybe weird for a lawyer to say, but like perfection, I'm like, that's not something I've ever been good at or has ever been really a good use of my time, cause like as I'm working with these clients and we're like, we got to move, we've got deadlines, we've got things. If I made sure that like every single literal I was dotted and T was crossed, we wouldn't be able to meet the deadlines that we meet on these, kind of mega deals that we do. And so I'm like, I kind of think perfection's a waste of time, actually. Like from a billable hour perspective, like it's a waste of time,
Sure. And in a lot of ways, like you're never going to get to perfection.
No.
So why are we striving for something that we never will get to?
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're like, oh, my life would be perfect if I had $10 billion, but then you get that and you're like, this isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Now I need 100 billion. It's not about money, but mold is a great example of that. Everyone's like, I need a mold-free home. Like I want to be zero mold. Like everything has to be perfect. First of all, you can't really attain that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a very low mold home, maybe even no mold, but there's still going to be spores and stuff like that for the most part.
I think that's so important for people to understand too, is like, and it was actually really empowering. Josh Rochelle with Texas Mold Inspectors was one person that told me, you don't have to have a perfect house. It just has to be better than where you're at. And the good thing is you came from such a bad situation. It's not gonna be that hard to find a place that's like better than where you're at to where y'all can do some healing, And that was like eye-opening to me because that's almost a natural reaction. You think you have to go to a perfect environment to heal. And it's like, no, you just have to be in less of a swamp than what you're at, and you can make, significant progress. And even the healing process is like, so it's not linear, it's so up and down, especially with little kids. One thing that I tell people, because consistently they ask, they're like, what regimen, what supplements, what do you do? What did you, I'm like, sometimes we take breaks. Sometimes like we don't do anything. Sometimes I let them eat gluten and dairy. Like sometimes they do things that are just inherently not good for them. But now that their bodies are clean to a place where like they understand what it feels like to feel good, when they eat some of those things, they know what it feels like to feel bad. And that's really important to me because like with me and my husband, for example, we didn't realize how bad we felt in that house because we've had a lifetime of toxicity. I'm sure that house wasn't our only exposure, He, like I said, he was in the Army for 14 years, combat veteran. He lived next to like tire burning places. Like he has a level of toxicity, outside of that house. So I think it's important when people realize what their bodies feel like when they're in a state of, health, so that they can compare and know, okay, this environment makes me feel bad, or this food makes me feel bad, or, whatever it is, just so they have that comparison, because it can happen so slowly, gradually, that like we don't, doesn't register.
Yeah, I think definitely these days we're bombarded by so many toxins, and there's so much pollution, and there's so much, I mean, even the organic foods and like there's hardly anything that's perfect,
Yeah.
but it's really important for people to live that healthy lifestyle constantly so that your body can fight against all these different things.
Yep.
But especially, with kids are more susceptible and elder people and autoimmune people. But these days, like we're seeing like everybody has an autoimmune or like some kind of condition. And frankly, like we're seeing that every house has mold. So if you start to put these dots together, maybe it's not causing all your issues, but let's get rid of the mold. Let's get rid of the plastics. Let's get rid of like the toxic stuff that we can. Doesn't have to be perfect. But like you said, even a little bit of progress is really helpful.
Yeah.
Whether it's a business or your health.
Yes.
Like do something, write down a business plan, start a podcast, if you want to, maybe you want to start a podcast, email 100 people to get on your podcast.
Yeah.
Or email one person, maybe you'll get lucky.
Yeah. I agree.
And we talked about a lot of cool things. So you have some really cool acronyms, which we don't see a lot, like CHB, Certified Healthy Home Builder, CHHB. Something like that.
Certified Passive House Builder, CPHB.
B.
Certified Passive House Builder.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the BBA, Building Biology Advocate.
Yes.
Which people don't even think about these things. Like what's a passive house or how do we have a biologically safe home? People don't realize that there's unsafe conditions in these homes that can literally change your life forever. But one of the ones I really liked was the WEB, Women Empowered Business. And we talk a lot about mentorship, and it's clear as day that it seems like women are kind of taking over a lot of these advocacy and awareness sort of things. Can you talk about empowerment and mentorship from your point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really blessed in my career and just in life to come across people who were incredibly willing to share, either their experience or their advice or both. And I think it's been such an amazing journey of working with legal professionals who you inherently look up to because you're like, yeah, you're doing a really good job. And also I like the way you do it. It's not just about the work, it's how you do the work. Early on in my career, I really struggled to find female mentors because they were so I've always worked in a male dominated industry. And so a lot of the women I felt were a little bit too, like the way that they approached management, for example, was a little bit more with that masculine energy. And I was just kind of like, that doesn't really resonate with me. Like, I'm not going to go in and start screaming at people and like banging my fists on the conference table, which was, years and years ago, but like at a time that was pretty consistent. And I was like, that's just not my style, And then I had a boss, he was a Marine, and he's probably still to this day one of my favorite bosses, but he was just very cool, calm, and collected, very confident, very much. And he just kind of summed up his approach by saying, I'm just going to be the same person I am with everyone. And that way there's never a question as to whether or not, there's never a question as to my integrity because I'm the same with the CEO as I am with my assistant, And he really was. And nothing bothered him. Nothing was personal, And so I was like, okay, that is the energy that I can embody. And so, so I share that with everyone because it resonated with me, and maybe it will resonate with people, maybe it won't. But for the people that it does, I think that you can be a force and you don't have to be forceful. And I think that that's something that I've taken with me through my entire career, and even through, building it into consulting, because I go into these meetings with these, really skilled architects and really skilled builders, and I feel perfectly fine. Like not nervous, not intimidated. They're just people, and I'm just a person. I'm no better than anybody else. They're not better than me. Like we're all just very much equals sitting across the table. And I think it's really important for people to remember that, both in their approach and how they receive people, just not to be intimidated to go try something new, not to be intimidated to invite yourself to the table and take a seat confidently, I don't think I ever really struggled with what some people call, what do they call it? When you don't feel, imposter syndrome. I recognize that it's a thing, but why? I almost think that it's like, why did we introduce that concept? Like who benefits from that?
Yeah.
because we're literally all just people, perfectly capable of figuring things out and doing things and making things better, And I heard a comment. I don't think it was it was not a dig, but it certainly resonated as like, I wonder why that person is telling me this. But somebody had said, he was telling me about other people in the industry, the construction industry, and how they're like, why are these people who don't have any experience in construction now finding their way into the construction industry? And he was saying it as a compliment. Like he was saying, from his perspective, he thinks, well, the outside perspectives are needed. And so, he felt very happy that there are people without construction backgrounds who are kind of getting into consulting and stuff. But I was like, interesting that you would tell me that story. Like, what are you saying? But I just think, why not? Like, why not? I literally think the only thing that I'm incapable of is like doing surgery on somebody because I like don't have that skill or background. But like
You could
almost
do it.
everything else, if I had time to learn it or the desire to learn it, yes. But like on my own, everything else is learnable. Like none of this is brain surgery. It's all just figuring out. It's repeating a pattern. Everybody can do it, and so I think that if I were talking to a young person starting out, I would say, just go do it. Don't let anybody stand in your way. And if anybody feels like they're an intimidating presence, question why they're putting off that energy and how that serves them and not you. And I think that the more that because people helped me and shared their story with me and shared their resources with me and were open books, I became better, faster than they did. And I hope that when I share information with people starting out, they become better than me, faster than I did. And then I hope they bring me up too. I think that life is kind of a series of climbing and then reaching down and pulling people up ahead of you and then reaching back up, and I think that that's how it should be. I think that's the only cycle that's worth repeating.
Yeah, great. I like how when you talk about mentorship, it's not so much about how do I make millions, but it's about how do I carry myself and how do I act. And I like how you said that the gentleman you were talking about, his main thing was like just being himself. Mm-hmm. It's like when they say, if you're always honest, you never have to remember anything.
Yes.
And one thing I tell when I mentor people is like, if you want to be happy, you have to be yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't be anyone else. And there's a great attorney I met named Bob, who I will leave out his last name, but Bob. Yes. And great guy, powerhouse of an attorney. But what really stuck with me when we were having discussions until the restaurant was closed was how he approached random people with love. Mm-hmm. And literally, I love you to the bartender and to the waitress. And yeah, he's kind of a flirty guy, I guess, but he told me, I love my clients and I would kill for them. I would die for them. And that really stuck with me to where, you have to have an approach of love, but that's just who he is. Like nobody can change that. I'm like, don't you think you're being a little flirty? And he's like, that's just me. Like that's love. And it changed the way I look at a lot of things, but I think it's important not to just love random people. That's a plus, but love what you're doing. And that makes everything else so much easier. And like I said, when I'm mentoring someone, it's not about how do I make millions of dollars in my business? It's about how do I be myself so that I'm happy enough to work my butt off.
Yeah.
People know what they have to do to make money. People know what they have to do for self-help, but a lot of times they don't have that motivation. And I think a lot of that comes from self-love and loving other people and loving what you do. Yeah. And love just means like you can't live without this thing and your heart is burning. And that's why, I actually, just like you, started off wanting to be a vet. Like I love animals. And then I realized that I love...
That's such a random thing that we have in common.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Well, it is random. But it's, I think animals kind of show us how beautiful nature can be.
Yeah.
And how cute and cuddly and also vicious and savage. And, as kids, we learn about bugs and how they get squished and some of them are cute. But anyway, I think it's interesting how, the path develops. Like I loved animals, then it turned into I love people. Then it turned into I got to figure out a way to make money doing this because I love my family and myself. And I think, I don't really get along with people who say, oh, I hate this, I hate that, I hate them, I hate myself. Like,
Yeah.
first of all, stop saying it
Yeah.
and start saying, you could say, I very much dislike. But
Mm-hmm.
I think operating out of love, and shout out to Bob, he really is great in that way. And I think that's why he's so successful, because if you love your clients, like you really love them, you're going to fight for them.
Yeah.
And if you love yourself, you're going to fight for yourself. And, like you said, if you need to take a week to cry, do it. But if you really love yourself and your kids and your family, eventually you got to get up and keep moving.
Yeah. Get up and figure out what God put you here for. I totally agree. And I love that. I love that he loves everybody. I think it's important to maintain that. But I think it's also like it's almost like you're training your brain too, because when you look for something, you see it, so if he is projecting love, he's looking for opportunities to love, show his love to other people. That's what he sees. And that's what, you can see bad. If you're looking for bad, you can also see good if you're looking for good, And so like consistently when my kids and I go out and somebody is nice to us, somebody does something kind for us, I remember distinctly we went to the Nutcracker one time and my daughter, we were trying to get a snack like in the window of, whenever they do the break. And you only have a short period of time to do that, and the line was super long. And so we weren't going to make it through the line. And some stranger like saw that we were trying to get a snack and he was like, here, you can have this. I'm not going to be able to eat it. And we were like, that is so kind. So we make a big deal about those little things when people notice and they're kind to us, because I want my kids to see that the world is full of kind people. Yes, the world is also full of jerks. There's lots of jerks, but we're not looking for them. We're looking for the kind people, and we're going to mirror that and emulate that. We're going to pull that forward, And I think that's all of our responsibilities. Like, you get to decide what world you live in, and perception is everything. Perception creates your reality. So if you think that we live in a horrible world, you're right. If you think we live in a beautiful world, you're right. And it's your choice.
Absolutely. And I like how you talk about rewiring the brain, which is the manifestation kind of aspect, in my opinion, where, not just when people are looking, but also when nobody's looking and you're at home alone and you're despising your actions and you have regrets and guilt. Like, a lot of times it starts with just looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, like 100 times. Or like, some people really struggle to love themselves. And even if you've done so many horrible things, which is all, subjective, like they're probably not that bad, but there's always, wherever you are, that's your starting point. Mm-hmm. That's where you can start to love yourself, start to love others. And like you said, there's a lot of jerks, but they just need a little love. I mean, for the most part, showing love to other people opens up so many doors.
Yeah.
And I've seen even in business, like sometimes you got to do things out of love, not just for money. Mm-hmm. Or, I love helping people. So I've gone out of my way to help probably more people than have actually paid me, just out of my love for people. And like you said, I mean, we see in the animal kingdom, there's good and bad, there's beautiful and ugly, and you really got to choose what you're going to focus on. Mm-hmm. And I think manifestation is kind of that rewiring your brain. Like, if you genuinely hate yourself, tell yourself 50 times that you love yourself. Mm-hmm. Or tell yourself, hey, I love working hard every day. I love breaking a sweat and the calluses on my hands and crawling through moldy attics or whatever it is. Like, you got to love it until you really dislike it enough to make a change.
Yeah.
But if you're in that position where there's no motivation, you can't manifest anything, make a change. I mean, look at your life, write it down, all the things that you dislike, and write down some fixes, some solutions. I think it really starts with writing it down, visualizing it, speaking it.
Yeah.
And, I like making content about it, like online, which is how all this started for me, was making mold videos.
Yeah.
But I find a lot of joy in helping other people. That's why I've started this podcast and mentorship. It's like, if I'm having a bad day, I'll go make a video about how to have a good day. And it's like, whatever you want to do, like, you can make money, you can be successful doing that, whether it's making people smile. There's comedians, there's people who make people cry. There's people who scare people, there's scary movies, there's funny movies. Like, you can make success out of anything you want, especially with the internet.
Yeah.
the AI and Google.
Yeah. I think that's super important for people to know and to really believe. And I tell my kids this too, because, I don't know why, but they're like, what am I going to be when I grow up? This is like the current fixation. They're 10 and 8. So I'm like, you've got time, like, but my 8-year-old, she is adamant at this point that she's like, I don't want to go to college, because she's like, I don't want to leave you. She's very like attached to me. And I'm like, I'll go with you, we'll travel. Like, it's fine. But I guess for me, for what I want for my kids is I want them to set themselves up for options and then choose what you do, but give yourself the best option. That's what I did, right? Like, especially like going from vet school to the hardest school to get into at the time. I was like, I'm just going to start at the top and give myself options. Like, I could still wait tables with a business degree if that's what I choose, but I have options. And then I want to go to law school. Okay, I'm going to do that. And I don't know what kind of lawyer I'm going to be at this point, but I have options now, So I think focusing on giving yourself options is like super, super important. I had a point and I forgot what it was. What did you say? What were you talking about before?
I forgot to.
It was a really
well,
good point.
there's so
that I was
many
going to tie
things.
into you.
Well, one thing that I like that you said is, or I feel like we never tell our kids, which I don't have any, but I've learned a lot about, is like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Be happy.
Yes.
Like, I feel like that we're on the same wavelength, which nobody ever told me that when I was growing up.
Yes.
It was literally doctor, lawyer, accountant.
Yes.
Or I used to want to be like a paleontologist before I was a vet.
Yes,
And they're
me
like,
too.
good luck
That is
making
so
money.
funny.
Really?
Yes.
Good luck making money digging up dinosaur bones in the desert. Like, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Which I would have probably enjoyed. But
interesting hyperfixation on like, how do you make the most money? Which I think is like, I mean, we're different ages, but I feel like maybe our parents were in a similar mindset where it's just like, where, my mentality is give yourself options. The older mentality was make money, like figure out happiness later,
Yeah, but they don't tell you, like, when you start making all that money, that it doesn't make you
You're still not happy. Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I think the older generations, they were not happy. Like, they had the marriage, they had the money, they gave you the nest egg, but they weren't exactly happy. A lot of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, my grandparents, bless them, they've been married 60 years, happy.
Yeah.
And that happens. But I think, if I had kids, when I do, it's be happy and then monetize that.
Yes.
Make money off what makes you happy.
Exactly.
Because you could be making, I know other mentors who are living in Zurich, making plenty of money being mentors.
Yeah.
And their biggest clients are these millionaire, billionaire, Wall Street execs who literally hate themselves and their family because they have all the money in the world. But then what?
Yeah.
You could say, well, I have the perfect penthouse. I have the perfect view. I have 3 Bugattis, but that's not going to make you happy. And the number one thing I think anyone wants for their kids is for them to be happy. Yeah. Even my mom used to tell me, if you want to work at McDonald's, work at McDonald's.
To be like the best damn McDonald's worker there ever was.
Right. But being happy is like what she's always wanted for me.
Yeah.
And I said on the first episode, there's people flipping burgers that are making $5 an hour, and there's people that are probably making 6 figures flipping burgers.
Yeah.
So if that's your passion, then go ahead and be happy and do that. And I think whatever you're doing, there's a way to make the money.
Yeah.
And these days, if it makes you happy chasing butterflies around, there's an Instagram page where someone is making a lot of money doing that.
That's awesome.
So it's like, just follow your passion. I think it's easier these days. And I always say, like, pursue your passion. Mm-hmm. Never let it go. Cause I did the desk job 9 to 5 and a whole year went by and I was like, what did I just do? I didn't even like make any money or anything. Like, I was just sitting there checking off a box on like a resume, which I think everything for a reason. Yeah. But if you're stuck in that scenario and you're just not happy, and you'll know when you're happy, like you might smile, you might laugh a little. Like, some people I feel genuinely haven't laughed in a long time. Yeah. Like that hard laughter you used to get with your friends, or, find these people in your life that make you happy. Be the person that makes yourself happy. Be the person that makes other people happy.
Yep.
And I think that just opens up so many doors.
I agree. And even, I guess, going a step, like, I think about it kind of in a continuum, but I think that I start with gratitude. And so, like, before I even open my eyes every morning, I've trained my brain. Like, I wake up and my brain starts saying, thank you, God. Thank you that I get to wake up at 4 a.m. Thank you that I have this Pilates class that I can go to. Thank you that my body will do this Pilates class that I like to do every day. Thank you for this job that I have to go to. Thank you for the sustenance it provides my family. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I might be, if I didn't start with gratitude, I might be like, God, I don't want to do this again. Like, and there could be so much drudgery in it. But if you start with gratitude and you start with praise and thanksgiving for like the source of everything that you have to be grateful for, that you could also very easily complain about, but choose to be grateful for it, then you have the opportunity to multiply that, and I think about finances as a byproduct of gratitude and of happiness. Then the money will flow. Then the question is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to keep it? Are you going to hoard it? Are you going to pay it forward? Are you going to multiply it by giving it to people, by, giving it to charities, by giving it to places that can multiply it for you? How can that help other people? And so that's been a big mind shift for me. Whereas early in my career, it was like money, money, money. I have to make money. I have to support myself. I have to, all this. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I realized I was putting the power I felt in myself, without thinking about, well, where does my source of power come from? Where is the strength, And so that's kind of how manifestation fits into my life. Is I love to practice intention. I love to practice gratitude. I love to look for the good, but always I want to tie it back to God, to the source of the good, to the source of the thanksgiving, to the source of the happiness. And then not only what more do I want for myself, but what more am I willing to give to the world with the gifts that have been given to me? And that kind of circular exchange of energy, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's so many golden tidbits here. But I think people underestimate gratitude because people think, oh, that's just like some hokey pokey nonsense. But it's actually like a process that you put your body through of when you say, I'm grateful for this, you're actually feeling a good feeling in your body. As opposed to when you say, I hate this, you're just filling your body with hate. And there's actually chemicals associated with that. But gratitude is actually like a great attitude. That's what I think the word means. That
I never thought about that.
Yeah, it's there's you're grateful, but it's a grateful attitude.
Yeah.
And I think it's the best attitude because if you're just thinking all day, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, your gut is like twisted up in knots. Where when you start with gratitude and people underestimate also like meditation, starting your morning with calm nervous system and like doing the breathing 10 seconds in, 12 seconds out, starting your day from a good place so you can have a good place, a good day and make other people's days good. And you talked about giving back, which I think is the ultimate gratitude. Like, I'm so grateful for this stuff. I'm going to give it to someone else. Which kind of segues me. I wanted to talk about Malachi's Message a little bit, which is a nonprofit, which is so commendable. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Malachi's Message Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. It was started by Emily Rochelle and Elizabeth Crape. They were the founders. I came on as vice president, I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And our whole goal is to help support people who have been impacted by mold. So whether that's providing education or financial resources or emotional support. We have a toy replacement fund because, as you probably know, a lot of times when people are impacted by mold, their kids lose everything that they've ever known, and they don't really have the fully developed brain to really understand what's happening. So it's just an incredible loss for these kids to lose their favorite stuffies, their favorite toys, favorite things that are precious to them. So our toy replacement fund helps to, it lets the parents kind of pick out what toys that they want, and then we just have them delivered to the house. And it's always such a beautiful experience when the parents share those videos with us and the kids, that are kind of opening up those toys and experiencing that joy after they've experienced such loss. But Malachi's Message is named after Emily and Josh Rochelle's son, Malachi, who they lost due to Emily's extreme mold exposure. And so the foundation, we have a gala every year, and it's early December because that would have been Malachi's birthday. And our whole goal is to just kind of bring people together, not only to have them understand what people are going through when they are impacted by mold, but also to be part of the solution, and not just not an unreachable solution, but a solution that really touches on all of the ways that their families may have been impacted, and then kind of forging that community, not based in fear, always based in science, always based in collaboration, always based in resources and resourcing, and just letting people know that they're not alone. It's incredibly important. So I've been honored to be a part of this organization, and just kind of help it get started, and with it's another way that I'm really grateful for my legal background, being able to help us get set up the right way, and with the right people, right foundation, and everything. So thank you for asking. It's a foundation that's very close to my heart.
Yeah, it's very commendable and very awesome, and very sad that how it started. And people don't realize that mold exposure, like other environmental things, can take lives. I think a lot of that is swept under the rug, but it's very real, and it's awesome how that turns into something bigger to help people. And getting kids toys, which we all know is so important. I mean, for your family to function, the kid has to have their toys. Yeah. I was the same way.
That's one of the things I remember distinctly when we were leaving the house that had mold, and I was going every day to clean everything out. It was I threw everything away in my closet except for like a few outfits that I needed for work, and I had no problem with that. But the hardest part was like sitting in my kids' toy room with all their toys just spread out on the floor, and like looking at each one and trying to think of like which one is worth saving, which one is going to be like absolutely traumatizing if they lose it, and just like literally holding each toy in my hand and making that choice without them there, like. And
you're even attached to the toy at this point.
I'm like, oh, like it means so much more, than it was just the toy. So, so it seems small, but it's been very impactful for people. So we're really happy that we've been able to provide that.
Yeah, it's the little things that people don't think about a lot with mold, like your toys, your furniture, your books, your pictures, like
your baby's drawings.
Yeah, and it's not always, you don't always have to get rid of and burn everything, but there's definitely a decision that needs to be made for sensitive people. Mm-hmm. And I know we're probably getting close to the end-ish, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the healthy home idea and building biology. Yeah. And what are your main pillars or things that you want people to take away, like big issues that we see?
Big issues that we see consistently across climate zones, because I represent people nationwide. It's the building envelope, and it's the mechanical system. Typically, it's not a busted pipe. It's not always a leaky window, although leaky windows are probably close third. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But those are the main things. And then, if you have the opportunity to build a house new, it's needing to understand that you've got to specify in the construction documents if you have a expectation as to material handling, storage, because that is not something that's built into any builder's typical process. But if you're upfront with them and that you have requirements and expectations, then they can certainly include that in their pricing and bid that for you. It's not something that anybody should expect. It's not something that's required by code. It's not something that's required by regulations. And so technically nobody has done anything wrong if those things are not watched. Technically, mm-hmm. Right? But typically people have an expectation that is just not supported by code or regulations. So if you have an expectation, it needs to be in writing, it needs to be communicated, and it needs to be clear. And that is a big mindset shift for most people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't think about it much, but whether it's renting or buying, like you're signing a contract. This is a legal agreement, which I've of course learned. I'm a new attorney. I've also been a mold assessor for years, and we've seen that you can't just do the standard mold testing anymore. Like you need a mold assessor. In Florida, we call it a licensed mold assessor. Mm-hmm. Only a few states even have a license for that. But you need someone who knows building science and building biology. Like when you talk about the building envelope, people don't understand what that means, I think. But we're talking about condensation coming out of thin air behind your walls, water appearing out of thin air, and like water not draining properly off your windows. And there's so many different things, but your typical, even your expert may not know that you could be having invisible problems behind your insulation. And these are the things that sit there long term. And a lot of the times there's no fix. Like, you really have to restart the build or demolish, which is pretty, I want to say rare, but it's more common than people think.
Yeah. One thing that I see a lot in the Houston area is, they'll start with a remediation, and there'll be a remediation scope, and it's a limited scope. But when you start to realize that the sources of the microbial growth or the confirmed mold are air infiltration and exfiltration, then you've got a building envelope issue. And so a lot of people are under the misunderstanding of thinking, if I just complete the scope of work that's listed in my remediation protocol, then this is all going to be fixed. And what I help some of my remediation clients understand is, if we have identified that there's a compromise in the envelope, air is just going to travel the path of least resistance. So if we fix 1 or 2 rooms, but we don't assess the entire, the envelope is like a balloon. You can't do a cross section of a balloon and expect the balloon to still do what hold the air, right? And so that's a tough pill to swallow, but I think it's important for homeowners to understand: are you doing a remediation? Are you doing a are you making the house the way that it was before? So if it was a 1960s house, are you restoring it to 1960s type leaky envelope? Or are you doing a retrofit, which is completely changing the performance of the whole house? You can't do a retrofit kind of piecemeal. Arguably, you can do a phased retrofit, but usually not if the mechanical system is impacted, because that touches every room of the house, right? So houses that have a compromised mechanical system are not good candidates for a phased retrofit. But people don't understand the difference between those terminologies, and rightly so. Like, the average homeowner does not understand that information. But I help people kind of understand exactly what they're dealing with, not to scare them or not to tell them that they can't have a home that is habitable, but so that they understand the limitations of whatever the choices that they're making. Because I'm a big proponent of, you've got to go in eyes wide open. You're not looking for perfection. We're not requiring perfection, but you have to go in eyes wide open and understand exactly what trade-offs you're making with the investment. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. A mold assessor is someone who makes the remediation protocol. It's a separate company because we don't want a conflict of interest.
Yep.
When a remediation company just starts making their own protocol and assessing your house, that's a conflict of interest. But we often see, like, it's very hard to get rid of all the mold and mycotoxins. But once you do, you still have to address the source that caused it. So you can spend literally 6 figures, maybe even 7 figures, which is extreme, but we've seen it, getting rid of mold. But if you're not fixing the source, which is moisture, even if airflow is involved, but it's a moisture problem.
Yeah, because moisture travels in air. So
Yeah. And that's the invisible humidity that leads to condensation, like you see on your cold Coke can. But mold is caused by moisture. Bacteria, mold, they need moisture. So I tell people, look for those moisture problems. Mm-hmm. But really great insights into that. And I think close to, if not a perfect podcast episode. Any final thoughts as far as motivating people into manifesting things and mentorship?
Yes. I think that everybody, if you are looking to make one change today, I think start with gratitude. Just look around the small things, thank you. Thank you for my car that gets me places. Thank you for the food that sustains me. Just small. And start with gratitude. Then I would move to identifying the things that make you happy and start pointing those out to yourself. Being kind to yourself, but also just showing up in the world in the way that you would hope somebody would show up for you. So help other people. Be transparent if you don't know the answers, but always, don't sell yourself short either. Let people know that you're capable of figuring it out, even if you don't know it yet. That's one of my favorite lines when I get new clients is I'm like, I might not know the answer, but I can figure it out, and I have like 100% success rate. So, and I think people appreciate that, right? Because none of us are perfect. None of us know everything. And yeah, I think just find ways that you can help people who were in your position before you were, help shorten that timeline for them, and just leave every place better than where you found it. Every room, every meeting, every phone call, just make it better.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Boy Scout motto: leave no trace. Leave no garbage and stuff behind. Make it better.
Yeah.
Help someone across the street. But for me,
Imagine the world if we all did that.
Yeah, and for me, it's the two letters DO, do.
Just do it.
Right, and really just do it. If only Nike didn't take that.
I know, they ruined it.
But do is so important, and you got to find the power to do. Whether it's God or you find that power within, ultimately it all comes down to you, and do something. And like you said, people are good at something. Like you're good at something. You've learned something that you can help others with. There's something that you're great at and you can become even greater at, and do something, even if it's just taking that walk. Do something and make it positive and do it with love. But
100% agree.
Christina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.